The air crackled with tension as Julia, sweat stinging her eyes, wrestled with the limp weight of the Coyote. The gurney swayed precariously, suspended halfway up the reservoir's sheer wall. Below, jagged rocks seemed to reach up like skeletal fingers, while worried faces peered down from above, their voices muffled against the stone. "Her pulse is thready!" Julia yelled, her voice strained. "We're losing her!" This wasn't just another rescue, it was a fight against time. The Coyote, later named Angel, had slipped into cardiac arrest just as Julia had secured the catch pole. Finally, they reached the top. A makeshift triage area had been set up on the dusty ground. Julia and her team worked to stabilize Angel. Oxygen hissed, needles pierced skin, and monitors beeped erratically. The urgency was palpable. "Blood pressure is dropping," a volunteer shouted. Julia, her face pale but resolute, administered another injection. "Come on, Angel," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos. At the veterinary hospital, the emergency room buzzed with activity as doctors and technicians rushed around. Angel was whisked into surgery. X-rays revealed a bullet lodged near her eyes, a chilling testament to the cruelty she had endured. The vets worked meticulously, knowing one wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. Hours later, Julia sat in the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on her tired face. The weight of the day pressed down on her. Had she done everything she could? Could she have done more? The vet finally emerged, his expression grave. "She's stable for now," he said, his voice weary. "But it was touch and go. The bullet caused significant damage. She's blind." Julia nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The fight was far from over. Julia's connection to the natural world was forged in childhood. Her parents, both wildlife biologists, instilled a deep respect for all living creatures. They spent countless hours exploring the valley's ecosystems and teaching her about the interconnectedness of life. The Santa Ynez Valley was a haven for wildlife, home to deer, bobcats, mountain lions, and coyotes. But this idyllic setting was under threat. Urban development and human encroachment were shrinking habitats and putting pressure on wildlife populations. Julia witnessed these changes firsthand. This fueled her passion to make a difference. After graduating with a degree in wildlife biology, she returned to her hometown and established Wild Haven, a sanctuary for injured and orphaned animals. Wild Haven became a beacon of hope for countless creatures. Julia and her team rescued animals from all sorts of predicaments: hawks with broken wings, deer entangled in fences, and orphaned bear cubs whose mothers had been killed by poachers. Each rescue was a unique challenge, requiring specialized knowledge and unwavering dedication. Julia's work with coyotes was particularly complex. These intelligent and adaptable animals were often misunderstood. Farmers sometimes saw them as a threat to livestock, while others feared them as dangers to pets. Julia recognized their vital role in the ecosystem, helping control rodent populations and maintaining the balance of nature. Through education and outreach, she worked to dispel myths and promote understanding. The call crackled through the receiver, static clinging to the frantic voice on the other end. "Ms. DeCino, this is Robert Elms. I hiked the trails near the Santa Ynez Mission. There's a coyote trapped down in the old reservoir." Robert's voice hitched, a mixture of fear and concern evident. "I've seen her around before, a real beauty, but she's not doing well." Julia's professional instincts kicked in. "Mr. Elms, can you tell me exactly where she is? What's her condition?" "At the bottom of the reservoir," Robert repeated, trembling. "It's dry mostly, but a long drop. She's not moving much. I think she's hurt bad. I've been watching her for 2 days. I don't know how much longer she can hold on." Julia didn't need more details. The image of the abandoned reservoir, a relic of the mission's past, flashed through her mind. "I'm on my way, Mr. Elms. Stay there if you can, but please be careful." The tires of Julia's pickup crunched on the gravel road, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the still afternoon air. The familiar landscape of the Santa Ynez Valley blurred past. Rolling hills dotted with oak trees, vineyards stretching out like green carpets. But Julia barely registered the scenery. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations and anxieties. The reservoir, a circular depression carved into the earth and lined with crumbling stone, stood as a stark reminder of the mission's past. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. The metal rungs of the ladder were cold and slick beneath Julia's gloved hands. Each step down brought her deeper into the oppressive silence of the reservoir. As she reached the bottom, the sight before her confirmed her worst fears. The coyote lay huddled in the shadow of the high walls, her thin body barely visible against the dark earth. Her breathing was shallow and labored, a faint, wet wheeze audible in the still air. Dr. Ramirez, a seasoned veterinarian, frowned as he examined the x-rays. A bullet, a small caliber, but it's lodged deep. It's a miracle she survived this long. Julia spent countless hours at Wild Haven, tending to Angel's needs. She hand-fed her small portions of easily digestible food, administered medication, and cleaned her wounds. The initial days were touch and go, but slowly Angel began to respond to Julia's gentle touch and soothing voice. Julia would sit beside her enclosure for hours, talking softly, telling stories of other rescued animals, of the valley's changing seasons, and of the hope that lay ahead. A bond began to form between them, built on trust and compassion. Angel, deprived of her sight, learned to recognize Julia's scent and the sound of her footsteps. The morning of March 23rd dawned crisp and clear. Julia entered Angel's enclosure for a routine check before starting her day. But what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Nestled against Angel's belly were 5 tiny squirming pups, suckling contentedly. Despite her blindness and weakened state, Angel was a picture of maternal devotion. Julia's breath caught in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes. "Oh, you incredible girl," she whispered. This revelation deepened Julia's resolve. This wasn't just about saving a coyote. It was about giving these pups a chance at life. However, California law prohibited possessing a coyote without a special permit, and euthanasia loomed as a devastating possibility. Julia immediately began the arduous process of applying for an exemption. She compiled meticulous documentation of Angel's case, vet reports, x-rays showing the bullet, and records of her rehabilitation. She wrote impassioned letters to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, DFW, pleading Angel's case. The DFW's response was initially cautious. They acknowledged Julia's dedication in the extraordinary circumstances, but stressed their mandate to protect public safety. Concerns were raised about Angel reverting to wild behavior and the risk of disease transmission. Julia wasn't deterred. She rallied her team of volunteers, launching a public awareness campaign. They created a website, shared Angel's story on social media, and organized a petition that quickly garnered thousands of signatures. The legal battle became complex. Julia navigated a bureaucratic maze, attending meetings with DFW officials and consulting legal experts. She faced opposition from some local ranchers who viewed coyotes as a nuisance. One particularly tense meeting with DFW officials stands out. Ms. DeCino, Andrew Hugan, the DFW spokesperson, said, "We have a responsibility to consider all factors. Coyotes are wild animals. They pose potential risks. Angel is different," Julia countered. "She's blind. She's been through unimaginable trauma. She's not a threat to anyone. And more importantly, she's a mother." The debate continued for hours, with both sides presenting their arguments. Julia emphasized Angel's unique circumstances, her gentle nature, and the educational value of her story. The legal process dragged on for weeks, each day filled with uncertainty. Julia knew that Angel's fate hung in the balance. The day of the pups' release arrived, a bittersweet moment for Julia and her team. The young coyotes, now nearly full-grown, were restless and eager to explore the world beyond their enclosure. Julia watched as they bounded around, their playful energy a stark contrast to their mother's quiet demeanor. Julia opened the enclosure gates, and the pups hesitated for only a moment before darting out. Julia watched them disappear into the underbrush, a lump forming in her throat. She knew they were ready, but a part of her worried about them facing the dangers of the wild without their mother's guidance. Finally, after weeks of anxious waiting, the news arrived. The DFW had granted Julia a special permit, allowing Angel to remain at Wild Haven. The decision was based on the unique circumstances of the case, overwhelming public support, and Julia's unwavering commitment to Angel's well-being. The news spread quickly, and celebrations erupted at Wild Haven. Julia felt a wave of relief wash over her, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. Angel's story didn't end there. She became a symbol of resilience and an ambassador for wildlife conservation. Years later, as dawn illuminated the enclosures, Julia stood outside Angel's pen. Angel, her fur streaked with gray, lifted her head to sniff the air, her ears twitching at the sounds of the awakening valley. Julia smiled, a deep sense of peace filling her heart. "You've taught us so much, Angel," she whispered. "You've shown us the true meaning of resilience, the power of love, and the importance of protecting the wild places and the creatures that call them home." Angel's legacy extended beyond her days at Wild Haven. Her story had sparked important conversations about wildlife conservation, coexistence, and the power of compassion. Wild Haven received increased support, enabling them to expand operations and rescue even more animals.